On a cold night, a poor girl finds 3 abandoned babies and decides to take care of them, never imagining they were the lost triplets of a millionaire who was mourning the loss of his daughters. If you enjoy emotional stories, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're listening from. Continuing. Rauku Street Angels. Chapter 1. Survival. London shows no mercy to the weak. Between mirrored skyscrapers and mansions hidden behind high walls, the city swallows dreams and spits despair onto the cracked pavements. And it was on these same pavements that Leah learned to survive. At just 7 years old, Leah knew every alley, every safe awning to sleep under, every establishment that threw still edible leftovers in the bins. Her black hair, tangled and uncut for so long she couldn't remember, framed a small face where 2 immense brown eyes observed the world with a wisdom no child should possess. That early autumn, the night fell colder than usual for October in the capital. Leah clutched the tattered coat she had found in the rubbish of a block of flats the week before. 3 sizes too big, it served as a blanket on rainy days. That Friday promised to be one of those nights. Mrs. Gable didn't show up today, she murmured to herself, walking hurriedly down Oxford Street, dodging executives and tourists who didn't even glance down to notice her existence. Mrs. Gable was a hot dog vendor who 3 times a week would save a sandwich for Leah at the end of her shift. She wasn't at her usual spot today, which meant the girl would have to make do with the leftovers from the market she'd managed to gather in the morning. A slightly bruised banana and 2 pieces of stale bread. The first drops of rain began to fall as Leah reached Green Park. That place, surrounded by green amidst the concrete, was one of her refuges on nights when the police intensified their patrols and the shelters were too full. Among the ancient trees was a small abandoned structure that had once been a tool shed. The broken door and glassless window didn't stop it from serving as a temporary shelter from the rain. Just for tonight. Just tonight. And tomorrow, I'll try the shelter in Camden again, she whispered, running between the trees as the rain grew heavier. Her bare feet stepped in puddles and wet leaves. Darkness already dominated the park when Leah finally reached the small shed. Breathless, she pushed the door carefully, alert for any unexpected presence. It wasn't uncommon to find other homeless people or even drug users in these places. For a child alone, every new space was a risk. The interior was empty and surprisingly dry. Leah sighed in relief, letting her small body slide down to the cement floor. The rain was now falling with full force, creating a curtain of water that further isolated that forgotten corner of the park. She took the piece of bread and the banana from her pocket, mentally calculating how she would divide the scarce meal to make it last until the next day. That's when she heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible under the noise of the storm. A cry. At first, she thought it was just the wind in the trees or perhaps an abandoned cat. But the sound had a pattern that was all too familiar, a cadence she would recognize anywhere. A baby's cry. Leah froze, the bread halfway to her mouth. Her senses, sharpened by years of survival, went on high. Alert. The crying was coming from outside, not far from there, and it wasn't just one. There seemed to be more than one infant's voice mixed with the storm. For a few seconds, she considered pretending she hadn't heard anything. The night was cold, the rain intense, and she could barely keep herself alive in this merciless city. She didn't need more trouble, but something in those cries, the fragility, the helplessness, resonated deeply within Leah, like a mirror of her own helplessness, multiplied. "Damn it," she grumbled, putting the food back in her pocket and getting up. The door creaked as Leah pushed it open, facing the rain again. The sound became clearer, coming from a set of bushes a few meters from the shed. Her eyes, already adjusted to the darkness, caught a subtle movement among the leaves. Soaked in a matter of seconds, Leah followed the sound to a particularly dense thicket. She carefully pushed the branches aside, and what she saw made her heart clench. A wicker basket, already soaked, where 3 tiny babies were squirming, wrapped in damp blankets that no longer offered any protection. "Oh my God," she whispered, kneeling in the mud. They were 3, girls practically identical, no more than a few weeks old. Their skin was purplish from the cold, and their cries, once audible, now seemed too weak, as if they were losing the strength to protest their abandonment. Without a second thought, Leah picked up the basket. It was heavy for her thin arms, but adrenaline was coursing through her veins. She ran back to the shed, protecting the unexpected cargo as best she could from the relentless rain. Inside the makeshift shelter, she placed the basket on the dry floor and quickly took off her soaked coat. With trembling fingers, she began to remove the wet blankets that enveloped the babies. The three were crying faintly, their small bodies shivering. "Easy, easy," she murmured, trying to remember what she had seen mothers do with their babies in parks and bus terminals. She took off her least dirty t-shirt, which she wore under 2 other layers, and began to gently dry the first baby's body. The other 2 waited, their cries now more intense, as if they knew some kind of help had arrived. Leah worked methodically, drying them one by one, then wrapping them in the only dry garment she had, a sweatshirt she'd been given by a student weeks ago. It wasn't ideal, but it was all she had. Who would do this? She asked herself aloud, examining the identical faces. The 3 had the same expression, the same face shape, the same fine, dark hair stuck to their small heads. They were perfectly identical, and something about them seemed different. They didn't have the look of the street children Leah was used to seeing. Their skin, despite the cold, looked healthy. Their underclothes, now damp, were of good quality. "Triplets," she whispered, remembering the word she had once heard from a nurse who had briefly cared for her when she had pneumonia last year. "Your triplets." Leah knew she should seek help, take the babies to a hospital, call the police, or find an adult. But something inside her hesitated. Her own experiences with authorities were not good. The only children's home where she had stayed for a few months had been a nightmare of neglect and abuse, from which she had run away as soon as she had the strength to jump the wall. The street had been a conscious choice. Dangerous, yes, difficult, certainly. But it was hers. In these children she saw something of herself, abandoned, left to die by those who should have protected them. One of the babies gripped her finger with surprising strength, her little eyes now open and fixed on Leah. It was as if she were asking for a promise. "It's okay," she said, feeling a strange determination grow inside her. "I'll take care of you. Just until morning, just until we find a safe place, I promise." The night progressed slowly and challengingly. With no bottles, no nappies, nothing but her own ingenuity, Leah improvised. She remembered a working tap near the park entrance. She waited for the rain to ease a little and ran to it, filling a plastic bottle she carried for her own needs. With nothing to feed the children, she focused on keeping them warm and dry. She tore her second t-shirt into pieces, creating makeshift nappies. Her stomach rumbled with hunger, but the piece of bread and the banana, her only food, now seemed so insignificant in the face of the needs of those 3 small beings. "Tomorrow," she promised, both to herself and to them, "tomorrow we'll find food for you." The hours dragged on. Leah didn't sleep. Every time one of the babies cried, she rocked her, whispered words of comfort, quietly sang songs she vaguely remembered hearing at some point in her short life. Lullabies whose full lyrics she didn't know, but whose melodies remained in some untouched corner of her memory. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." Somehow the babies seemed comforted by her presence, by her warmth. Eventually the 3 fell asleep, small bundles huddled against each other, seeking mutual warmth. Leah watched, fascinated at the sleeping faces. Who were they? Where did they come from? Why would someone abandon 3 such small, helpless children on a stormy night? Unanswered questions danced in her tired mind. The early morning hours were advancing when a noise outside alarmed her. Quick footsteps, muffled voices, the beam of torches cutting through the darkness. "Are you sure it was here?" "Positive. The informant said he saw someone carrying the basket into this area of the park. If we fail, he'll kill us. We need to find the packages." Leah froze. Packages? Were they talking about the babies? Who were these men? Instinctively, she covered the 3 children's mouths with calculated gentleness, praying they wouldn't wake up, that they wouldn't cry. The torchlights passed through the cracks in the broken window, momentarily illuminating the inside of the shed. Leah huddled in the darkest corner, shielding the babies with her own body. For a terrible moment she thought she had been discovered, when one of the beams of light stopped near where she was. But soon the light moved on, continuing its search in another direction. Nothing here. Let's check the other side. If that tramp lied to us, calm down. We have until dawn. They can't have gone far. The footsteps moved away, but the terror remained. They weren't police or social workers. There was something in the coldness of those voices, in the way they referred to the children as packages, that sent shivers down Leah's spine. For the first time since she had found the babies, she felt true fear. Not for herself, but for them. The city was beginning to wake up when Leah made her decision. She couldn't stay there. She couldn't seek help through normal channels. Whoever was looking for these children did not have good intentions, and she doubted the authorities would believe a street girl over well-dressed, articulate adults. She carefully poked her head out of the shed, checking the surroundings. The rain had subsided to a fine drizzle, and the first rays of sun were trying to break through the dense clouds. The park seemed empty, except for a distant gardener starting his shift. "Now or never," she murmured, picking up the 3 babies and settling them against her chest with one arm, while the other held the improvised sweatshirt like a sling. She left the shed silently, keeping to the shadows of the trees, walking quickly but not running so as not to attract attention. Her destination was clear in her mind. Mrs. Clark, the former nurse who lived in a council estate on the outskirts of East London. Leah had met her the previous winter, when the old woman had found her unconscious with a fever at a bus stop. Instead of calling the authorities, Mrs. Clark had taken her to her small studio flat, cared for her for 3 days, and fed her until she recovered. Since then, from time to time, Leah would visit the elderly woman, who always had a plate of food and stories to share. If there was anyone in London Leah trusted, it was Mrs. Clark. And if there was anyone who would know what to do with 3 newborns, it was also her. Leaving the park unnoticed was the first challenge. Then came the journey across the awakening city. On any other day, Leah would be just another invisible child, ignored by passers-by. But today, carrying 3 babies, she knew she would attract attention. She chose back routes, avoiding main avenues. She got on a bus using a ticket a distracted lady had dropped. She sat at the back, huddled, the babies hidden under the oversized coat. When one of them started to whimper, Leah pretended it was a kitten she had rescued. 3 transport connections later, she finally arrived at the council estate where Mrs. Clark lived. It was one of those old buildings from the city's housing program, with peeling paint and narrow corridors, but it housed decent, hard-working people. With her heart pounding, Leah climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. She stopped in front of door 305, hesitant. What if Mrs. Clark wasn't there? What if she couldn't help? What if... Before she could complete the thought, the door opened. Mrs. Clark, with her grey hair tied in a messy bun and wearing a floral apron, looked at her in surprise. "Leah, what are you—" That's when one of the babies, as if knowing they were finally safe, let out a loud, clear cry. The other 2, as if in a rehearsed chorus, joined their sister. Mrs. Clark's eyes widened, looking from the girl to the small bundles in her arms. "Good heavens, child, where did you get these children?" Leah, exhausted, hungry, still wet from the rain and shivering with cold, could only murmur, "They need help, Mrs. Clark, and there are people after them. Bad people." The old woman's expression went from shock to determination in seconds. Without asking any more questions, she opened the door completely. "Come in, quickly. Let's get you all sorted." Leah crossed the threshold, entering the small flat that smelled of freshly brewed coffee and homemade bread. In that moment, she felt something strange and almost forgotten: hope. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, on the 20th floor of one of the most imposing buildings in Canary Wharf, Richard Miles received the news that would change his life forever. Beside the hospital bed where his wife, Amanda, had been in a coma for 3 days after a strange accident, the businessman listened in disbelief to what the private investigator was telling him. "Mr. Miles, your daughters disappeared from the hospital nursery last night." There's no CCTV footage, no sign of a break-in. The nurses on duty saw nothing. It's as if your triplets simply vanished. Richard felt the blood freeze in his veins. First Amanda, now his daughters. What had seemed like a family tragedy was revealing itself to be a much darker nightmare. This was no coincidence, he said, his normally controlled voice now trembling with anger and fear. First they try to kill my wife, now they take my daughters. I want you to use every resource. I don't care about the cost. Find my daughters. The investigator nodded, but there was a grave expression on his face that Richard couldn't decipher. Sir, there's one more thing. We found this in the nursery. He held out a small metal object, a pin in the shape of an eagle. A pin identical to the one his father, Vincent Miles, the patriarch of the family's financial empire, always wore on his lapel. This can't be, Richard stammered, feeling the ground disappear from under his feet. The sun was already high when Leah finally fell asleep on the small sofa in Mrs. Clark's living room, exhausted after hours of helping the old woman improvise bottles with droppers, change nappies made from cut-up towels, and soothe the babies who seemed hungry and agitated. Mrs. Clark watched the sleeping girl and the 3 newborns, now clean, fed, and sleeping in an improvised bed made from a drawer lined with blankets. In her nearly 30 years as a nurse, she had never seen anything like it. The children were perfectly identical, healthy, obviously well cared for until recently, and clearly from a wealthy family, judging by the quality of the few clothes they still wore. The story Leah had told was frightening. Men searching for the babies in the park, referring to them as packages, the basket abandoned in the rain, the complete mystery of who they were or where they came from. "What mess have you gotten yourself into, child?" she whispered, stroking Leah's hair as she slept. The television on low volume was showing the local news. A reporter was talking animatedly about the city's anniversary, celebrations when the broadcast was interrupted for a special bulletin. "We interrupt our programming for a special announcement. Businessman Richard Miles, CEO of the Miles Group, has just announced the disappearance of his triplet daughters, just 2 weeks old. The children were taken from the Portland hospital last night. The businessman is offering a reward of £5 million for any information leading to the girls' whereabouts. According to police, the case may be related to the attack suffered by Amanda Miles, the businessman's wife, who remains in serious condition after a supposed car accident last Tuesday." The image showed a man of about 40, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a devastated expression, next to a photo of 3 identical babies. The same 3 babies who were now sleeping peacefully in the drawer-turned cot, just a few feet from Mrs. Clark. The former nurse felt her breath catch. She looked at the children, at Leah, and back at the television. She should call the police immediately, return the children to their desperate father. It was the right thing to do, but something about the story didn't add up. If the babies were in a luxury maternity hospital, how did they end up abandoned in a park in the rain? And who were the men Leah had heard searching for them, calling them packages? "Dear Lord, what crossroads have you put me at?" she murmured, turning off the television as she made her decision. Chapter 2. Improvised Refuge. Dawn had turned to midday when Leah finally opened her eyes. For a moment she felt disoriented, not recognizing the peeling ceiling above her or the soft sofa that replaced the hard pavements she was used to. Then it all came back in a rush, the storm, the babies in the basket, the desperate escape, Mrs. Clark. She sat up with a start, her heart racing. Where were the children? "Easy now, child. They're fine," said Mrs. Clark, emerging from the small kitchen with a steaming mug in her hands. "Here, drink this. It's chicken broth. You need to get your strength back." Leah accepted the mug with trembling hands, sipping the hot liquid as if it were the finest delicacy. Her eyes, however, never stopped searching for the babies. "They're sleeping in my room," the old woman explained, following the girl's gaze. "I managed to rig up better bottles with some droppers I had from my time at the health clinic, and the neighbor from 307 lent me some baby formula. She has a 6-month-old grandson." Leah nodded, relieved. The tension in her shoulders eased a little as she finished the broth. "Mrs. Clark, thank you for—" "Before you thank me, we need to talk, Leah," the former nurse interrupted, her expression suddenly grave. "While you were sleeping, I saw something on the television." The old woman walked over to the small table against the wall where a newspaper lay open. She pointed to the front-page headline, "Missing Triplets. Heiresses to the Miles Group kidnapped from hospital." Leah's blood ran cold. In the center of the page was a photo of the 3 babies, clearly the same ones she had found abandoned in the park. "It's them," she whispered, feeling dizzy. "But I didn't kidnap them. They were abandoned in the park, alone in the rain. I swear, Mrs. Clark." The former nurse nodded, sitting down beside the girl. "I believe you, Leah, and that's why we're in a complicated situation. You see, the news says the babies were taken from inside the Portland hospital, one of the most expensive and secure in the city. How did they end up in the park? And who were those men you heard looking for them?" Leah frowned, trying to piece together the puzzle. Maybe whoever kidnapped them gave up and abandoned them, got scared?" "Possibly," Mrs. Clark replied. "But there's something else that bothers me. Look at this photo." She pointed to an image of a middle-aged man next to a beautiful young woman, both smiling for the camera at some gala event. This is Richard Miles, the triplets' father, CEO of the Miles Group, one of the country's largest financial conglomerates. And this is Amanda Miles, his wife, the girl's mother. According to the report, she had an accident on Tuesday and is in a coma in hospital. "Accident?" Leah repeated, looking at the photo more closely. "In quotation marks," the old woman stressed. "The paper implies it might not have been an accident, but an attack. And now, 2 days later, the couple's daughters are kidnapped." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with implications. I think we're dealing with something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple kidnapping, child. And I think you may have saved these children's lives when you found them in that park." Mrs. Clark's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Leah felt the weight of responsibility fall on her shoulders, even heavier than when she had carried the 3 babies across the city. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her small voice reflecting the magnitude of the situation. "Should we call the police? Give the babies back?" Mrs. Clark sighed deeply, her tired eyes revealing a lifetime of difficult decisions. "Under normal circumstances, yes, without a doubt. But something tells me these are not normal circumstances. If someone tried to kill the mother and then kidnap the daughters from the hospital only to abandon them, well, it seems to me there's something very strange going on, and we don't know who we can trust." "So," Leah began, reluctant to verbalize what they both already knew. "So, for now, we keep them safe here, while we try to find out more, while we try to understand who would want to harm these children." At that moment, as if sensing they were the topic of conversation, a thin, sharp cry came from the bedroom. In seconds, it transformed into a trio of infant voices demanding attention. "They have good timing," Mrs. Clark commented, getting up with a tired smile. "Come on, let's take care of our little guests." The rest of that Saturday was a succession of improvised feedings, nappy changes, rocked babies, and monitored TV screens for more news on the case. With each bulletin, new information emerged, each more worrying than the last. The Miles Group has offered a reward of £10 million for information about the triplets. The amount, which has doubled since the initial announcement, has generated a wave of false reports and baseless leads. Sources close to the family report that Amanda Miles, before the accident, was in the process of creating a philanthropic foundation that would revolutionize the group's social assistance policies. Vincent Miles, the family patriarch and chairman of the board, has returned urgently from a trip to London to temporarily take over the group while his son, Richard, focuses on the search for his daughters. This last name made Mrs. Clark pause, observing the photo of the grey-haired man with a severe expression that appeared on the screen. Vincent Miles, around 70, wore an impeccably tailored suit and a small golden pin on his lapel, an eagle with its wings spread. "I know the type," the former nurse murmured, more to herself than to Leah. "Men who build empires and crush anyone who gets in their way, even family." Leah, who was holding one of the babies while trying to feed her with the adapted dropper, looked curiously at the old woman. "Do you think he has something to do with this?" Mrs. Clark shrugged, but her expression said more than her words. "I don't know, child, but in this world I've learned that money and power make people commit atrocities you can't even imagine, especially when they feel threatened." As the day wore on, the practical challenges of caring for 3 newborns in a small, under-resourced flat became increasingly apparent. The milk borrowed from the neighbor would soon run out, the improvised nappies weren't ideal, and above all, there was the constant fear of being discovered. "We need supplies," Mrs. Clark declared as night began to fall. "And a plan." Leah nodded, her 7-year-old brain working on solutions with the cunning that only life on the streets could teach. "I can go to Mrs. Joseph's pharmacy down the street. She always gives me free samples when I go there." Mrs. Clark seemed to hesitate. "It's dangerous for you to go out now, Leah. The whole city is looking for these children, and you were seen carrying them." "Nobody pays attention to me, Mrs. Clark. I'm just another street kid, invisible." The bitterness in those words made the former nurse's heart ache. It was true. The social invisibility that normally condemned children like Leah to indifference could now be her greatest protection. "All right, but be quick and discreet. And take this." She handed some notes to the girl. "It's all I have at the moment. Buy formula for newborns, small bottles, and disposable nappies." Leah went out into the night, blending into the shadows as only a child who grew up on the streets knows how. Her size and agility were advantages in a city that rarely looked down to see who was walking below its line of sight. The pharmacy was 4 blocks away. Normally, Leah would have made the journey in 10 minutes, but today she was extra cautious, checking every corner, every police car, every person who seemed to look at her for too long. Mrs. Josephs, a Lebanese lady who had run the small pharmacy for over 3 decades, smiled when she saw Leah enter. "Hello, little one. Haven't seen you in a while. Need bandages again?" Leah shook her head, approaching the counter and speaking in a low voice. "I need baby things, Mrs. Josephs. It's for a friend who had triplets." The pharmacist raised her eyebrows, surprised, but asked no more questions. There was something in Leah's eyes that requested discretion. "Of course, I'll show you what we have." 15 minutes later, Leah left the pharmacy with a bag containing 3 small bottles, a pack of newborn-sized nappies, a tin of special newborn formula, and some nappy rash cream. The total exceeded the money Mrs. Clark had given her, but Mrs. Josephs, with her usual generosity, had only registered part of the items in the system, treating the rest as samples or on promotion. "Send my regards to your friend," the pharmacist had said, with a twinkle in her eye that suggested she understood more than Leah had told her. "And tell her that if she needs anything else, she can send you. We have an arrangement." On the way back, Leah felt optimistic for the first time since she had found the babies. With Mrs. Clark and people like Mrs. Josephs helping, maybe they could keep the triplets safe until they discovered who really wanted to harm them. That's when she noticed the police car parked right on the corner of the council estate where Mrs. Clark's flat was. Leah's heart leaped. Instinctively, she retreated into the shadow of a tree, watching. 2 officers were talking to some residents, showing them what looked like a piece of paper, probably a photo of the babies. "Damn it," she whispered, the curse escaping her lips before she could stop it. There was no way to enter the building without being seen by the police. And even if she managed it, what if they had already knocked on Mrs. Clark's door? What if they were there now, questioning her? Her mind worked frantically, calculating alternatives. She could wait for the police to leave, but what if it took hours? The babies needed the bottles and nappies now. She could try to get in through the back, but there was no guarantee she could access the 3rd floor without being noticed. That's when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She almost screamed, but another hand covered her mouth before the sound could escape. "Shh, it's me. Michael," a familiar voice whispered. "Mrs. Clark's son." Leah relaxed slightly, turning to find the familiar face of Michael, a young man of about 25 who worked as a courier and visited his mother on weekends. "My mum called me," he explained, leading Leah away from the police's view. "She said you'd be coming back from the pharmacy, and that I should intercept you. She told me everything." Leah's eyes widened. "Everything?" "Yeah," he confirmed, his face a mixture of concern and determination. "And I agree with her. There's something very wrong with this whole story. Come on, we're going to my flat. My mum's already there with the babies." "Your flat?" "Yeah, on the other side of the city. We thought it was best not to stay at hers in case someone saw you going in last night." Leah followed Michael to where a motorbike was parked, out of the officer's sight. He put the shopping in the top box and handed her a helmet. "Hold on tight, kiddo, we're going for a ride." 30 minutes later, they were in Islington, a middle-class neighborhood miles away from the outskirts where Mrs. Clark lived. Michael's flat was small but clean and organized, reflecting the young man's practical personality. As soon as they entered, Leah ran to where Mrs. Clark was sitting on the sofa with one of the babies in her arms, while the other two slept in an improvised bed made of pillows. "Thank God you're all right, child," the former nurse exclaimed, obviously relieved. "When I saw those police officers arriving, I nearly had a heart attack. Luckily, Michael was already there to help me." "It was a close call," the young man said, unloading the shopping onto the small coffee table. "I helped Mum put the babies in a large rucksack, covered them with clothes, and we left through the back just as the police were entering the lobby." Leah looked around, taking in the new reality. In less than 24 hours, her life had been turned completely upside down. From a lonely street girl, she had become part of an unlikely operation to protect 3 babies who were apparently at the center of a dangerous plot involving one of the country's most powerful families. "What do we do now?" she asked, sitting beside Mrs. Clark and watching the small sleeping faces of the triplets. "Now," Michael replied, switching on the laptop he had taken from his bag, "we find out exactly who these children are and why anyone would want to hurt them." Over the next few hours, the 3 of them dove into an amateur yet meticulous investigation. Michael, who was studying computer science at night while working as a courier during the day, had impressive skills for finding information online. "The Miles Group is one of the biggest financial conglomerates in the country," he explained, showing graphs and articles on the computer screen. "It started with a small investment bank in the 70s, founded by Vincent Miles, and today it controls banks, insurance companies, property developers, and even a mining company." "But what does that have to do with the babies?" asked Leah, who was now helping Mrs. Clark feed the triplets with the new bottles. "Everything," Michael answered, opening a new page. "Look at this. 3 months ago, Amanda Miles, Richard's wife and the baby's mother, announced the creation of the Amanda Miles Foundation for the Future, an organization with an initial capital of £500 million to revolutionize access to health and education for children in vulnerable situations." "500 million, exclaimed Mrs. Clark, almost spilling the milk. "That's a fortune," Michael completed. "And here's the interesting part. According to this article in the Financial Times, Amanda secured that money through a deal with the board of the Miles Group, which stipulates that 10% of the conglomerate's annual profits will be allocated to the foundation. And let me guess," said Mrs. Clark, her expression hardening. "The patriarch, Vincent Miles, wasn't happy about that." "Bingo," Michael confirmed, pointing to a photo where Vincent, the grey-haired man with the eagle pin on his lapel, appeared with a disgruntled expression next to his smiling daughter-in-law at a charity event. Sources say he was against the foundation's creation from the start, arguing that excessive charity is bad management. But Richard, apparently inspired by his wife, supported the project. Leah watched the exchange between mother and son, trying to understand the implications. "So, this old man didn't want to give money to help poor kids?" The simplicity of the question made Mrs. Clark smile sadly. "It's more complicated than that, Leah, but deep down, yes. Men like Vincent Miles don't accumulate so much power by being generous. They see charity as a waste, unless it brings them some direct benefit, like positive publicity or tax breaks." "And there's more," Michael continued, his face illuminated by the computer screen in the darkened room. "According to these more recent reports, the foundation wasn't just going to be an ordinary charity. Amanda Miles was developing a program to investigate and expose unethical practices in the financial sector, including tax evasion, money laundering, and the exploitation of vulnerable communities. A program that could target the Miles Group itself, Mrs. Clark concluded. Exactly. And most importantly, according to the Foundation's charter, registered 2 weeks before Amanda's accident, full control of the organization would pass to her direct descendants if anything happened to her. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft, sucking sound of one of the babies on her bottle. "The triplets," Leah whispered, her young mind connecting the dots with frightening clarity. They would inherit control of the Foundation if their mother died, and with it, the power to expose any dirt they found about their own family's empire, Mrs. Clark completed, her voice trembling. "My God, Michael, are you suggesting that their own grandfather—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Mum," he replied, closing the laptop with a heavy sigh. "I'm just showing you the facts. Amanda has a mysterious accident and goes into a coma. Days later, her newborn daughters are kidnapped from the hospital, only to be found abandoned in a park, and now the whole city is looking for them, with a reward that keeps increasing." "And those men in the park," Leah added, remembering the cold voices she had heard in the early morning. "They didn't seem to want to rescue the babies. They seemed to want to eliminate them." The word hung in the air like a sentence. Mrs. Clark hugged the baby in her arms tighter, as if she could protect her from the world outside with her affection alone. "If this is true," the former nurse said finally, "then we can't just return the children. Not until we're sure they'll be safe." "But how do we prove something like this?" Leah asked. "Who's going to believe us against one of the richest families in the country?" Michael stood up, walking to the window to look out at the city lights spreading across the night. "We need concrete proof. We need to find out who tried to kill Amanda and who took the babies from the hospital, and we need to find someone we can trust to give this proof to." "Their father," Leah suggested, surprising herself. "Richard Miles. If he was supporting his wife against his own father, maybe he's our best bet," Mrs. Clark agreed. "But how do we get to him? And how do we know if he's not involved too?" The answer came from an unexpected source, the television Michael had turned on, to follow the news. On the screen, Richard Miles, with deep dark circles and a devastated expression, was speaking directly to the camera at an impromptu press conference. "I am making an appeal to whoever has my daughters. I don't want to know why you took them. There will be no questions, no police. I just want my daughters back, safe and sound. Please, they're all I have left." The camera kept rolling as Richard, apparently thinking he was off the air, was approached by an older man, Vincent Miles, the patriarch. "Control yourself, Richard," the older man said, in a low tone that the microphone still picked up. "Public displays of weakness won't bring your daughters back. Let our men handle this. They know what to do when they find who took them." The patriarch's icy glare sent shivers down the spines of the three viewers in the small flat. "His men," Mrs. Clark murmured. "Could they be the same ones Leah heard in the park?" Michael nodded gravely. "Probably, and that confirms our suspicions. Vincent doesn't want the children back. He wants to eliminate the problem permanently." "And their father?" Leah questioned, still looking at the frozen image of Richard on the television. "Do you think he knows?" "I don't think so," Mrs. Clark replied. "That's the look of a genuinely broken man. If he knew his own father was behind this, then he's the one we need to talk to," Michael decided. "But we have to be extremely careful. If Vincent finds out we have the babies, he'll send his men after us before we can blink." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. The magnitude of what they were facing seemed to grow with each minute. It wasn't just a matter of returning 3 lost babies. It was challenging one of the most powerful men in the country, a man apparently willing to eliminate his own family to protect his interests. "I never imagined," Leah began, her small voice betraying her fear. "When I found them, I just wanted to help. I just wanted them to be safe." Mrs. Clark hugged the girl with her free arm, while the baby in her lap fell asleep. "And that's exactly what we're doing, dear. Keeping them safe." "For now," Michael added, his gaze fixed on the window, where the city lights seemed endless. But we can't hide them forever. At some point, we'll have to act. That night, while the triplets slept exhausted after their bottles, Leah watched their identical little faces, so innocent, so fragile, completely oblivious to the turmoil surrounding them. In their few days of life, they had already faced more danger than many people do in their entire existence. "I promised you'd be safe," she whispered, gently stroking their soft cheeks. "And I'm going to keep that promise, whatever it takes." In the Miles mansion in Kensington, Vincent watched the city through the panoramic window of his study, a glass of rare whiskey in his hand. His mobile phone rang, showing an unidentified number. "Any news?" he asked directly, without preamble. "None, sir," the voice on the other end replied. "We've searched the entire park, but no sign of the merchandise. We're still looking." "Do I need to remind you of the urgency of this situation?" Vincent's voice was as cold as ice. "If those children turn up alive, if they get into my son's hands, everything is lost. Understood?" "Yes, sir. We'll do what's necessary." Vincent ended the call and swirled the amber liquid in his glass, contemplative. Behind him, the study door opened, silently. "Father?" Richard called, his voice exhausted. "Any news?" The patriarch adjusted his expression into a mask of concern before turning around. "Nothing yet, my son, but don't lose hope. We're using every possible resource." "I'm going to the hospital to see Amanda. The doctors say she's responding to some stimuli. Maybe she'll wake up." Vincent nodded, his face a perfect mask of sympathy. "Go, son. I'll be here if you need me." As soon as Richard left, Vincent returned to the phone. "Amanda is showing signs of improvement. Step up security at the hospital. No one enters her. Room without my express authorization. And as for the children, double your efforts. Time is running out." In Michael's flat, while everyone slept, one of the babies opened her eyes. For a moment, she seemed to look directly at Leah, who was sleeping beside them on the floor. A small smile formed on the infant's face, as if somehow the child knew she was in the arms of an unlikely angel, a homeless guardian, barefoot and hungry, but with a heart bigger than the entire city. Chapter 3. The Hunt. Sunday dawned with a fine, persistent rain that blurred the city's contours, turning London into a watercolor of grey and concrete. Leah woke to the cry of one of the babies and found Mrs. Clark already up, preparing more bottles in the flat's small kitchen. "Good morning, child," the former nurse smiled, her grey hair still dishevelled from sleep. "These little ones have a flawless internal clock, don't they? 5:30 in the morning, not a minute later." Leah rubbed her eyes and got up from the makeshift mattress on the floor, feeling a pain in her back that didn't suit her age. She walked over to where the triplets were lying and picked up the crying one, rocking her instinctively. "Did you get any sleep?" she asked, noticing the old woman's deep, dark circles. "A little," Mrs. Clark replied, testing the milk's temperature on the back of her hand. "I kept an eye on the television, watching the news. The search for the babies is on every channel." Leah swallowed hard. A day and a half had already passed since she found the triplets in the park. With every passing hour, the situation became more complicated, riskier. Michael emerged from his room wearing a courier's uniform with the characteristic thermal bag of delivery companies. "I'm heading out to work," he announced, quickly pouring himself a coffee. "It's best to keep a normal routine so as not to raise suspicion. Besides, while I'm on the street, I can try to find out more information." Mrs. Clark nodded, handing a ready bottle to Leah. "Be careful, son. Don't go near the Miles house or the hospital. Those places must be surrounded by security." Michael kissed his mother's forehead and ruffled Leah's hair before leaving. "Lock the door and don't open it for anyone," he advised. "I've left the laptop on with the news feeds. Call me if there's any emergency." When they were alone with the babies, Leah and Mrs. Clark fell into a strangely domestic routine. They took turns feeding, changing, and rocking the triplets, who seemed increasingly alert and responsive. Despite the tense situation, there was something comforting in that shared care, in that joint struggle to protect 3 innocent lives. "Do you think we should give them names?" Leah asked during a break when the 3 babies were finally asleep. "It feels strange just calling them the babies or the triplets." Mrs. Clark smiled understandingly. "They already have names, dear. We just don't know what they are." And I don't think it's a good idea to get too attached. Eventually, we'll have to return them to their family. Their rightful family, I mean, not that terrible old man. Leah nodded, though she felt a pang of sadness. In less than 2 days, she had already grown attached to the little ones. She had never had a family, or at least not one she could remember. The oldest fragments of her memory were of an overcrowded home, then the streets. She didn't know who her parents were, if they were alive or dead, if they had abandoned her, or if they had been separated by some circumstance. "How are we going to talk to their father?" she asked, changing the subject. "We can't just show up at his house with 3 babies in our arms." Mrs. Clark sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. "I was thinking about that all night. We need an intermediary, someone who can verify if Richard Miles is trustworthy before we reveal we have the children. Someone not directly linked to the family, but who has access to him." "A journalist," Leah suggested. "Too risky. The media is full of people who would do anything for an exclusive story. They could expose us before we even understand the whole situation." At that moment, Mrs. Clark's mobile rang. It was Michael. "Mum, I'm passing the London clinic right now. There's a strange amount of activity here, several police cars and what look like private security guards. Something's happened." "Turn on the television," he instructed before hanging up. Mrs. Clark rushed for the remote control. On the news, the anchor was reporting with a grave expression, "We are live outside the London clinic, where Amanda Miles, wife of businessman Richard Miles and mother of the missing triplets, has reportedly shown signs of recovery early this morning. According to hospital sources, Amanda briefly woke from her coma, was able to communicate with the medical team, and apparently made important revelations about the accident she suffered last Tuesday. Police have increased security at the location, and access to Amanda's room has been restricted. Businessman Richard Miles arrived about 20 minutes ago and did not speak to the press." Leah and Mrs. Clark exchanged hopeful glances. "She's awake," the girl exclaimed. "Maybe she can tell them who tried to kill her and who took the babies." "If it's who we think it is, her life is in even greater danger now," Mrs. Clark pondered, her expression grave. "Vincent Miles won't let her talk." The phone rang again. It was Michael, his voice now tense and hurried. "Mum, something really strange is happening. One of the nurses I spoke to said that before Richard Miles arrived, his father, Vincent, tried to enter Amanda's room, but was stopped by a private detective hired by Richard himself. Apparently, there was a serious argument between father and son in the hospital reception." "The situation is escalating," Mrs. Clark murmured. "Richard must be starting to suspect his own father." "There's more," Michael continued. "I managed to overhear part of a conversation between 2 security guards who seem to work for Vincent. They're intensifying the search for the triplets. One of them said something about scouring every alley and squat in the East End. I think they've somehow tracked Leah's path to our neighborhood." A shiver ran down Leah's spine. If Vincent's men were searching in East London, they would soon reach Mrs. Clark's council estate. And what if the neighbors talked about the old woman and her unusual visitor, about how she had left in a hurry with a large rucksack just before the police arrived? "What do we do now?" she asked, her heart racing. Mrs. Clark closed her eyes for a moment, thinking. "Michael, I need you to do something risky. I need you to try to get into that hospital and give a note to the detective protecting Amanda. Don't mention the children yet. Just say we have crucial information about the case and want to speak directly with Richard Miles, away from his father's eyes. It's dangerous, Mum. The place is surrounded. No, son, but it's our best chance. If Amanda is waking up and Richard already suspects his father, this is the time to act, before Vincent realizes he's lost control of the situation." After a few seconds of silence, Michael agreed. "All right, I'll try. But you two need to be ready to leave there quickly if something goes wrong. Take only the essentials and be prepared. I'll call as soon as I can." The call ended, leaving a tense silence in the flat. Mrs. Clark immediately began to gather their few belongings and supplies for the babies, while Leah watched, the triplets sleeping, oblivious to the chaos surrounding them. "Where would we go if we had to run?" the girl asked, her small voice reflecting her growing fear. "I have a cousin who lives in St. Albans, on the outskirts of the city. We rarely speak, but she would help us in an emergency. The problem would be getting there with 3 newborns without attracting attention. The following hours were an agonizing wait. Leah constantly checked the window, startled by any car that stopped on the street or any suspicious movement. Mrs. Clark kept the phone nearby, waiting for news from Michael, while caring for the babies with the calm efficiency of someone who has faced many crises. The sun was already high when the phone finally rang. It wasn't Michael, but an unknown number. Mrs. Clark hesitated before answering, putting it on speakerphone. "Hello? Mrs. Clark?" A male voice, deep and polite, sounded through the device. "My name is Raphael Stone. I'm a private investigator, hired by Richard Miles. I received a note from your son earlier today, suggesting you have important information." Mrs. Clark exchanged an apprehensive look with Leah before replying, "How do I know I can trust you?" A brief silence then. "Your son told me to mention that your shepherd's pie recipe is the best in London, but only when it's made in the green casserole dish you got from your late husband, Anthony." Mrs. Clark's face relaxed slightly. It was indeed a piece of information only Michael would know, a code they had established years ago for emergencies. "Where is my son?" "He's safe, don't worry. He couldn't come home because we identified suspicious individuals watching your building. Men who work for Vincent Miles. You're not safe there either." Leah felt her stomach sink. Vincent's. Men had found Michael's flat. "How did you know our number?" Mrs. Clark asked, still cautious. "Your son gave it to me." "Mrs. Clark, we don't have much time. The note mentioned you might have information about the triplets. Is that true?" Mrs. Clark hesitated, looking at the sleeping babies and at Leah. This was a step of no return. "Not just information, Mr. Stone. We have them. All 3 are safe and healthy." There was an audible sigh on the other end of the line. "My God, that's incredible. Richard needs to know this immediately, but not over the phone. Vincent has people everywhere, including monitoring calls." "How can we meet safely?" Mrs. Clark asked. "We can't risk the children's lives." "I understand completely. I'll send someone I trust completely to pick you up in—" He paused, considering. "No, better not. Let's do this. There's an abandoned tube station under Victoria Park, part of a project that was never completed. Few people know the access. It's safe and discreet. Can you get there?" Mrs. Clark thought for a moment. "Yes, I think so. But how do we get in?" "There's an entrance disguised as a maintenance depot, on the east side of the park. The door has a faded number 23 on it. It will be unlocked from midday. I'll be waiting for you inside with Michael. Just the 2 of you and the children, no one else. And Mrs. Clark, be very careful. The situation is even more serious than you imagine." "What do you mean?" she asked, feeling a new tightness in her chest. "Amanda Miles made a recording before the accident, something like a life insurance policy. In it, she details her discoveries about her father-in-law's illegal activities and her suspicion that he planned to harm her. That recording was hidden, but Richard found it last night. That's why he put security on her hospital room, even preventing his own father from entering." "And her? How is Amanda?" "Stable." She woke briefly, recognized Richard, but still can't speak clearly. "The doctors are optimistic, though, and that makes everything even more urgent. If Amanda makes a full recovery, she can confirm everything. Vincent is cornered, and cornered people are extremely dangerous." "We'll be there," Mrs. Clark affirmed, determination overcoming fear. "Midday." After hanging up, Mrs. Clark looked at Leah, who had listened to the entire conversation with wide eyes. "Do you think we can trust him?" the girl asked. "We don't have much choice, dear. And he knew about the green casserole dish, the code Michael and I set up years ago. Besides, if Vincent's men have already located this flat, we can't stay here." Quickly the 2 began to prepare. Mrs. Clark improvised a carrier using sheets and towels where the 3 babies could be transported close to her chest. She filled a rucksack with nappies, formula, and bottles. Leah helped as she could, carefully wrapping the children and organizing the few belongings they would take. "We'll leave separately," Mrs. Clark instructed. "I'll go first with 2 of the babies in the improvised carrier. You wait 10 minutes and leave with the 3rd. We'll meet at the Stratford bus station. Remember, head down, no eye contact with anyone. And if someone asks, the baby is your sister you're taking for her jabs. Leah nodded, her heart pounding with the responsibility. Mrs. Clark squeezed the girl's shoulder affectionately. You've been incredibly brave, Leah. Many adults would have crumbled under half the pressure you're facing. I'm proud of you. The words hit Leah in a deep, rarely touched place, pride. Someone was proud of her, not for her ability to survive on the streets or find food in bins, but for her courage, her determination, her humanity. A single tear ran down the girl's dirty face, but she quickly wiped it away. It wasn't time for emotions. It was time for action. Mrs. Clark left first, as planned, with 2 of the babies hidden against her body under an oversized coat. 10 minutes later, which felt like an eternity, Leah left carrying the 3rd baby, who was thankfully sleeping peacefully. The city was bustling that Sunday with people coming and going from churches, parks, and family lunches. Normally, this would help them blend into the crowd, but today, every glance felt like a threat. Every person who passed too close, a potential enemy. Leah walked with the ease of someone who knew the streets like the back of her hand. She knew which alleys to cut through to avoid main avenues, which routes were less monitored by CCTV, which establishments had back exits if she needed to escape quickly. Life on the streets had given her a knowledge of the city that no GPS could match. At the arranged bus station, she found Mrs. Clark already waiting, seemingly calm, but with vigilant eyes that never stopped scanning the surroundings. They quietly joined and boarded the next bus heading into the center, sitting in separate seats so as not to draw attention. The journey felt endless. At every stop, Leah tensed her muscles, ready to run if necessary. Every person who got on was meticulously observed. Was it one of Vincent's men, an undercover police officer, someone who would recognize a street child carrying a newborn? Finally, they got off 2 blocks from Victoria Park. They walked separately again, keeping a distance from each other, but always maintaining eye contact. The park, though public, had less frequented areas, especially on its eastern edge, where old and partially abandoned buildings created an almost ghostly scene. They found the door with the faded number 23, exactly where Raphael had described. It was ajar, as promised. Mrs. Clark cast one last look around before signaling for Leah to approach. "Ready," she whispered. The girl nodded, swallowing the fear that threatened to paralyze her. Together they entered what looked like a dusty storeroom. At the back of the room, a metal door led to a dark corridor, lit only by spaced-out emergency lights. The corridor sloped gently downwards, clearly delving into the city's underbelly. "Hello?" Mrs. Clark called, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Mr. Stone? Michael?" Silence. Only the distant sound of water dripping somewhere in the tunnel's depths. Leah felt a shiver run down her spine. Something wasn't right. That silence. It was oppressive, threatening. "Mrs. Clark," she began, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming from deeper in the tunnel. A figure emerged from the gloom. It was a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing an impeccable dark suit. It was definitely not Michael. "Mrs. Clark," he called, his voice strangely familiar. "I'm Raphael Stone. Thank you for coming." The former nurse took a cautious step forward. "Where is my son?" "Michael is further ahead, with Mr. Miles. For security, they stayed in the main station area. I can take you to them." Leah studied the man with suspicion. There was something in his eyes that didn't match his polite words, something cold, calculating. The same kind of look she saw in the drug dealers and thugs who controlled certain areas of the streets. "You actually came," said another voice, and a second man appeared beside the first. This one was shorter, older, with a neatly trimmed moustache and hands that fidgeted nervously. Mrs. Clark recoiled instinctively, pulling Leah close to her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice now trembling. "That doesn't matter," the first man replied, taking a step forward. "What matters is that you brought the packages, as agreed." Packages. The same word the men in the park had used. Leah felt the blood freeze in her veins. This wasn't Raphael Stone. This wasn't anyone sent by Richard Miles. They were Vincent's men. How did you find out? Mrs. Clark began, but the man cut her off with a dry laugh. It wasn't difficult. Your son isn't as discreet as he thinks. He was followed from the hospital. We intercepted the note he tried to deliver. A masterstroke, I must admit, using our own surveillance system against us. But Vincent Miles didn't get where he is by being outsmarted by amateurs. The second man pulled something from his pocket, a gun, which he pointed casually in their direction. Now let's simplify things. Hand over the babies and no one gets hurt. You go on. With your lives, we go on with ours. End of story. Mrs. Clark clutched the bundle tighter against her chest, her legs wobbly, but her determination unshaken. You're going to kill them, aren't you? That's what Vincent ordered. The first man shrugged. It's not personal, ma'am, it's just business. Those children represent a risk Mr. Miles cannot accept, a threat to the legacy he has built. They're babies, Leah exclaimed, unable to contain herself. Innocent babies, how can you even think of— Shut it, street rat, the man with the gun cut in. You've caused enough trouble by finding these kids. You should have starved to death in some alley before you got mixed up in this. Leah felt anger mix with fear, forming an explosive cocktail in her chest. She looked at the baby in her arms, at the sleeping face oblivious to the danger, and knew she couldn't give up. Not now, not after everything they had been through. No, she said simply, her voice small but firm. We're not giving you the babies. The armed man gave a nasty laugh. And what do you think you can do to stop us, brat? Look at you, 7, 8 years old, malnourished, no family, no one who cares. Do you really think you can take on men like us? She's not alone. The new voice, coming from behind the men, made everyone turn. At the other end of the tunnel, illuminated by the faint emergency light, stood a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with deep dark circles and stubble. It was unmistakably Richard Miles, the face they had seen so many times on television, pleading for his daughter's return. Beside him was Michael, his face bruised but with a triumphant smile, and further back, partially hidden in the shadows, were 3 police, officers with guns drawn and what appeared to be the real Raphael Stone, the detective. The 2 men froze, clearly caught by surprise. Drop your weapons, one of the officers ordered. Slowly, on the ground. Now. The man with the moustache obeyed immediately, but the taller one hesitated, his eyes calculating distances and possibilities. Don't be stupid, Renato, Richard said, taking a step forward. It's over. We have everything on tape. Your confession about my father's orders, your intentions for my daughters. Even if you escape today, you'll be hunted for the rest of your life, and Vincent won't protect you. He's being arrested as we speak. The revelation seemed to hit the man like a punch. His shoulders slumped, his resistance visibly evaporating. He said it was for the good of the company, he muttered, finally lowering his weapon, that the children would destroy everything he built. What he built was an empire of lies, extortion, and financial crimes, Richard replied, his voice as cold as ice, and he used our family, our name, to protect his schemes. But it's over. The police advanced, quickly handcuffing the 2 men as Richard ran towards Mrs. Clark and Leah, his eyes fixed on the small bundles they were carrying. Are they— he began, his voice failing with emotion. Are they— They're fine, Mrs. Clark confirmed, opening her coat slightly to show the 2 babies. Perfectly healthy. This young lady here, she pointed to Leah, found them abandoned in a park during a storm. She saved their lives. Richard looked at Leah as if he were truly seeing her for the first time. A street child, dirty, disheveled, malnourished, holding his 3rd daughter with a care and protection that many adults would be incapable of showing. You— He knelt to be at her level, his eyes shining with unshed tears. You saved them. It wasn't a question but a statement filled with disbelief and gratitude. Leah just shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. Anyone would have done the same. Richard shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. No, little one, not just anyone. You risked your own safety for 3 unknown babies. That's the kind of courage one rarely sees in this world. Gently, he held out his arms, silently asking to hold his daughter. Leah hesitated for a moment, not out of distrust but from a strange sense of loss. For 3 days, these children had been hers. She had protected them, fed them, comforted them. Now she was about to return them to their real father, to their real life, a life she would never be part of. Finally, with a small sigh, she handed the baby to Richard, who received her with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. The businessman looked at his daughter as if he couldn't believe she was really there, safe in his arms. "Sophia," he whispered, kissing the little one's forehead. I thought I'd lost you forever." "Sophia," Leah repeated, the name sounding strange, yet familiar in her mouth. "Is that her name?" Richard nodded, still absorbed in contemplating his daughter. "Sophia, Beatrice, and Laura, my little warriors." Raphael Stone approached, lightly touching Richard's shoulder. "Sir, we need to get out of here. This place isn't safe, and there may still be other of Vincent's men in the area." The businessman seemed to wake from a trance, looking around as if suddenly remembering where they were. "Yes, of course, let's go to the hospital. Amanda, she needs to know we've found them." Quickly the group began to move, following the tunnel in the direction from which Richard and the others had emerged. Raphael explained in a low voice that they had intercepted the call to Mrs. Clark thanks to a wiretap they already had on phones associated with Vincent. When they realized the trap, they quickly organized a counterattack, using Michael as a willing decoy to lure Vincent's henchmen. "Your son is a very brave man, ma'am," the detective commented to Mrs. Clark. "When he understood what was happening, he didn't hesitate to put himself at risk to protect you." Leah walked in silence, feeling strangely empty. The adrenaline of the chase, the danger, the confrontation was dissipating, leaving only exhaustion and an indefinable sense of loss. It was as if she had completed an important mission and now didn't know what to do next. Go back to the streets, to the hunger, the cold, the invisibility. Beside her, Michael seemed to notice her discomfort. He bent down slightly to whisper, "Hey, kiddo, don't worry. This isn't over yet, and you're part of this story. No one's going to leave you behind." Leah wanted to believe him, but years on the streets had taught her that promises were rarely kept, especially when they came from people with houses, families, and organized lives. In the end, everyone went back to their comfortable homes, and she went back to the alleys. The group finally emerged through another door, this one leading to an underground car park where 3 armored cars were waiting. Additional police officers stood guard, ensuring the perimeter was secure. "Please get in," Raphael instructed, opening the door of one of the SUVs. "We will go directly to the hospital. The medical team is already prepared to receive the children and examine them." Mrs. Clark and Leah were placed in the same vehicle as Richard and the triplets, while Michael would go in another car with Raphael and part of the security team. Before they separated, mother and son hugged for a long time. "You were so brave, my son," the former nurse said, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Your father would have been so proud." "I just did what was right, Mum," Michael replied, kissing her forehead. "See you at the hospital." Inside the armored car, Leah felt small and out of place. The leather seats, the perfectly adjusted air conditioning, the uniformed driver, it was all so far from her. Daily reality. Beside her, Richard held Sophia with reverent care, while Mrs. Clark still carried Beatrice and Laura. "I need to thank you both properly," the businessman said, finally tearing his gaze away from his daughter. "You saved not only my daughter's lives, but mine as well. If anything had happened to them after Amanda, I don't know if I would have survived." "How is your wife?" Mrs. Clark asked. "Stable. The doctors are optimistic. She woke up briefly last night and managed to say a few words. It was enough for me to realize something was deeply wrong. She mentioned my father, mentioned a danger to the babies. That's when I increased security at the hospital and started investigating on my own." "And you found the recording she left?" the former nurse questioned. Richard nodded, surprised. "How do you know about that?" "The fake Raphael mentioned it. It seems your father has many informants." "Yes, I discovered that the hard way," Richard agreed, a trace of bitterness in his voice. "For years, I turned a blind eye to many things. I knew my father was ruthless in business, but I never believed he would be capable." His voice failed, looking at little Sophia in his arms. "Greed and power can corrupt even the most basic family ties," Mrs. Clark commented, her voice soft but laden with wisdom. "But it's also in the darkest moments that we find unexpected lights." Her gaze fell on Leah, who was watching the urban landscape pass by the armored car's window. "This child here, for example. Homeless, no family, with practically nothing. And yet, when she found your daughters abandoned in the rain, she didn't hesitate to sacrifice the little she had to protect them. Not for a second did she consider ignoring them or using them for her own benefit, as so many adults would have done." Richard looked at Leah with new interest, as if really seeing her for the first time. "How old are you, little one?" "7, Leah replied, still looking out the window. "I think." "You think?" She shrugged. "No one ever told me for sure. In the home where I stayed for a while, they said I was 5, but that was a long time ago." "And your parents? Family?" Another shrug, this one stiffer, more defensive. "Never knew them. Or I don't remember." "Doesn't matter." The businessman exchanged a significant look with Mrs. Clark over the girl's head. In the silence that followed, only the gentle purr of the luxury engine and the occasional sighs of the babies could be heard. Finally, the car stopped in the underground car park of the London clinic. A medical team was already waiting, along with more security guards and what looked like the detective chief inspector in charge of the case, judging by the warrant card he displayed. "Mr. Miles," the DCI greeted as Richard got out of the car, "it is with great satisfaction that I can confirm Vincent Miles is in custody, as are 3 of his main associates. The evidence found in his office, combined with the recording left by your wife and the statements collected today, are more than enough to keep him locked up for a very long time." Richard nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Inspector, but now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take my daughters to be examined, and then visit my wife. She deserves to know that our family is together again." The inspector agreed, clearing a path. The medical team quickly took over, receiving the triplets with the professional efficiency characteristic of one of the country's best hospitals. Mrs. Clark accompanied the babies, her nursing experience making her a natural fit with the group. Leah, however, was left behind. Standing in the middle of the underground car park, suddenly alone watching everyone move away, absorbed in their new roles in a story that, for her, seemed to be coming to an end. That's when she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Richard, who had walked back a few steps. "Aren't you coming?" he asked, holding out his hand. Leah looked at the outstretched hand, confused. "Me? But I'm nothing to them. I'm not family, I'm just—" "You," Richard interrupted, his voice firm and emotional, "are the reason my daughters are alive. You are the person who, having absolutely nothing to give, gave everything you had to protect them. In my book, that makes you more family than many who share my blood." He knelt, bringing himself to Leah's level, his eyes meeting hers with an almost painful intensity. "Come on. Amanda will want to meet the hero who saved our daughters. And we need to talk about your future, because one thing I promise. You, Leah, your life on the streets is over as of today." His hand remained outstretched, an invitation, a promise, a bridge between 2 worlds that should never have crossed, but which fate, or perhaps the simple chance of a heavy rain and an abandoned basket, had permanently connected. With a small nod, Leah placed her small calloused hand in Richard's large, soft one. Together, they walked towards the lifts, leaving the dark car park behind and moving towards a future that, for the first time in her short life, seemed to hold more light than shadows. Chapter 4. A New Beginning. The London clinic, with its wide, sterile corridors, its soft-toned walls and its quiet efficiency, was like a world apart for Leah. As she walked beside Richard towards the pediatric wing, she felt like an intruder, a smudge of the street in an immaculate environment. She could feel the discreet but curious glances from the medical staff, the security guards, the elegant patients who moved about. Who was this ragged girl, with disheveled hair and worn-out clothes, accompanying one of London's richest men? The question hung in the air, unvoiced but palpable. "Don't worry about them," Richard said, noticing Leah's discomfort. They're just people who've never had to fight for survival like you have. Deep down, you're stronger than any of them." The words, though kind, did not lessen her sense of displacement. Leah's entire life had been defined by invisible boundaries, places she could and couldn't enter, people who would see her or ignore her, worlds to which she would never belong. This luxury hospital, with its smell of cleanliness and privilege, was the epitome of one of those forbidden places. They arrived at the neonatal unit where a team of doctors was already attending to the triplets. Through a glass window, Leah could see Mrs. Clark talking with the professionals, pointing to the babies and apparently providing information about the care they had received over the past few days. "Are they okay?" she asked, her small voice revealing a fear she didn't even know she was feeling. "They're doing wonderfully, all things considered," replied a doctor who approached, addressing Richard directly. "Mr. Miles, your daughters are perfectly healthy, slightly dehydrated and with some minor skin irritation due to the improvised conditions, but nothing serious. Mrs. Clark told us you used diluted standard formula to feed them." Leah nodded, suddenly apprehensive. Had that been wrong? Had they harmed the babies unintentionally? "It was an intelligent solution for an emergency," the doctor continued, noticing her worried look. "Not ideal in the long run, but it certainly kept them fed. And the improvised nappies, while causing some irritation, were changed frequently enough to prevent infections. In fact, I'm impressed with the level of care you managed to provide under such adverse conditions." Richard smiled, looking at Leah with a new level of admiration. "We owe everything to this little hero and to Mrs. Clark. Without them, my daughters would have—" He couldn't finish the sentence, emotion catching in his throat. The doctor nodded understandingly. "Well, they'll receive all the necessary care now, and you should go see your wife. She's been informed about the children's rescue and is eager to see you." Richard hesitated, looking from Leah to the triplets behind the glass. "Leah, would you mind coming with me? I'd like Amanda to meet the girl who saved our daughters." The question took Leah by surprise. Meet the baby's mother? The businessman's wife? The woman who had nearly died trying to protect her family and create a foundation to help children like her? It seemed too unreal. "Can I go like this?" she asked, looking down at her dirty, worn clothes. "You can go exactly as you are," Richard affirmed with conviction. "It's what's inside that matters, not your appearance. And what's inside you, Leah, is brighter than many people who wear designer clothes and expensive jewelry." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. Leah nodded shyly, and together they made their way to the ICU where Amanda Miles was a patient. Amanda's private room was spacious and equipped with the latest in medical technology. The woman lying in the bed, however, seemed small and fragile against the white sheets. Her face, nonetheless, still held traces of the beauty Leah had seen in photographs, and when her eyes opened at the sound of the door, they held a strength that no injury could diminish. "Richard," Amanda called, her voice hoarse but audible. "Did you find our girls?" Richard quickly approached his wife, holding her hand gently. "Yes, my love, we found them. They're fine, healthy, being examined right now. Thanks to this young lady," he indicated Leah, who remained uncomfortably near the door. "This is the guardian angel who found our daughters and protected them with her own life." Amanda turned her head slightly towards Leah, her eyes widening a little upon seeing the street girl. "Come. Closer," she asked, holding out her free hand. Hesitantly, Leah approached the bed. Amanda's hand found hers, surprisingly strong for someone who looked so frail. "Thank you," the woman said, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my family. You saved my reason for living." The simplicity of the gratitude, the pure emotion in those words, touched Leah in a way no material gift ever could. She felt her own tears well up, blurring her vision. "I only did what anyone would do," she murmured, repeating what she had said before, though she was no longer so sure of it. Amanda smiled, a weak but genuine smile. "No, that's not true. You did what very few people would do. You risked everything, mate, for 3 strangers. That is extraordinary." Richard cleared his throat, trying to control his own emotion. "Amanda, We have a lot to talk about. About my father. About what happened. About the future. But first of all, I want you to know the foundation is safe. The girls are safe. And Vincent is in police custody. Your recordings and documents were crucial. You were incredibly brave and insightful. Amanda nodded, her expression hardening for a moment. I knew he would try something. When I announced the internal audit of the companies, when I insisted on the clause that would give control to the girls if something happened to me, I saw the hatred in his eyes. You saw what I should have seen years ago, Richard admitted, the guilt evident in his voice. I was blind, Amanda, blind and cowardly, but that's over. I promise you, everything will be different now. A light knock on the door interrupted the moment. It was a nurse. Mr. Miles, the triplets have been examined and are ready to be brought up. Would you like to see them now? Amanda's face lit up with an intensity that seemed to restore her strength. Yes, please. My daughters. I want to see my daughters. Minutes later, the three little ones, now clean, fed, and dressed in new clothes provided by the hospital, were brought in small, transparent cots. The medical team arranged them so that Amanda could see them clearly, even while lying down. The reunion was of an almost sacred beauty. Though still too weak to hold the babies, Amanda could touch their tiny hands, their perfect little faces. Tears of joy flowed freely as she whispered words of love and relief. Leah watched the scene from a few steps away, feeling simultaneously part of this family and a complete stranger. It was like watching a film, an alternate reality where people lived in big houses with united families, where mothers and fathers loved unconditionally, where babies were welcomed with joy instead of being abandoned in parks in the rain. Mrs. Clark approached silently, putting an arm around Leah's shoulders. Are you all right, dear? She asked quietly. Leah shrugged, unable to name the whirlwind of emotions she felt. I think so. It's strange. Seeing them like this, with their real family. Mrs. Clark squeezed her shoulder lightly. You got attached to them, didn't you? The girl nodded, biting her lip to hold back tears. It's silly, I know. They were never mine, but for a moment, you had a family, the former nurse completed understandingly. It's not silly, Leah, it's human. We all need connection to feel that we belong to someone, that we are important to someone. Their conversation was interrupted when Richard approached, his face now more relaxed, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Amanda would like to speak with you both, he said, gesturing for them to come closer. By the bedside, Amanda seemed stronger, as if the presence of her daughters was injecting new life into her veins. Her gaze was clear and determined when she spoke. I want to thank you, personally. Without you, I would have lost everything that matters. And I want to propose something. Richard nodded, as if he already knew what his wife was about to say. The Amanda Miles Foundation for the Future was created to help vulnerable children like you, Leah, and we need people like you and Mrs. Clark, people who truly understand what these children face. Leah looked at Mrs. Clark, confused, not fully comprehending what Amanda was suggesting. We want you to be part of the foundation, Richard explained. Mrs. Clark, with your experience as a nurse and your generous heart, you would be invaluable to our community health programs. And you, Leah, Amanda continued, her voice gaining strength, would be our youth consultant, our voice on the streets, no one better than you to tell us what children like you really need. The proposal was so unexpected, so far outside the reality Leah knew, that she couldn't even begin to process it. Work for a foundation? Her, a street girl with no formal education, no documents, no anything? But I don't know how to do anything, she argued. I've never really been to school. I can't read very well. I don't have clothes or... All of that can be sorted, Richard interrupted gently. Education, documentation, clothes, those are just logistical details. What can't be taught or bought is what you already have. Courage, compassion, determination. Besides, Amanda added, exchanging a meaningful look with her husband, We need to talk about something more permanent. Richard took Leah's hand in his, crouching down to her level. Leah, what I'm about to ask might seem sudden, and you have every right to think about it for as long as you need. But Amanda and I have talked, and we feel there's no more appropriate time than this. The businessman took a deep breath, his emotional eyes fixed on the girls. We would like to know if you would consider the possibility of becoming part of our family, legally, permanently, as our daughter. The world seemed to stop spinning. Leah looked from Richard to Amanda, to the triplets in their cots, to Mrs. Clark, who was smiling through tears, trying to find some sign that she had misunderstood, that this was some kind of cruel joke or misunderstanding. Adopt me, she finally managed to articulate, her voice almost a whisper. Amanda nodded, reaching out her hand to Leah. The girls need an older sister, someone who has already shown she would do anything to protect them, and we want to give you what every child deserves, a family, a home. But you don't even know me, Leah protested, though a spark of hope insisted on growing in her chest. And I'm just an extraordinary girl, Richard completed. A child who, with every reason in the world to be bitter and hardened, chose compassion and sacrifice. We don't need to know your past to know what's in your heart, Leah. We saw it in the actions you took to save our daughters. The proposal was so big, so far beyond anything Leah had ever dreamed of, that she couldn't find words to respond. Adoption, a family, a home, concepts that existed only in the realm of fantasy for a girl who slept in cardboard boxes and scavenged for food in bins. You don't have to answer now, Richard assured her, seeing the confusion in her eyes. It's a big decision. In the meantime, we offer our house as your temporary home for as long as you wish. And I, Mrs. Clark intervened shyly, would be available to help you with the transition if you'd like. I could visit you regularly, be a familiar face in this new world. Leah looked at the triplets, who were now sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the emotional drama unfolding around them. Sophia, Beatrice, and Laura. For them, she had faced rain, hunger, pursuit. For them, she had discovered a strength within herself she never knew she possessed. And now, because of them, she was being offered the chance of a completely different life. Can I think about it for a bit? She asked, her voice trembling. Of course, Amanda replied, gently squeezing her hand. All the time you need. The following days were a roller coaster of new events and experiences. Leah was temporarily installed in the Miles mansion in Kensington, a house so large she could easily get lost in the corridors. She was given her own room, with a soft bed that at first felt too strange to sleep in after years on the hard ground. Mrs. Clark visited her daily, helping her adapt to the new reality. Together, they watched the news reports detailing the fall of Vincent Miles's corrupt empire, the multiple investigations that now extended to various sectors of London's financial elite, and Amanda's gradual but steady recovery. The foundation, now free from Vincent's threatening shadow, was in the full process of being structured. Amanda, even from the hospital, coordinated the first steps, insisting that programs for street children be prioritized. The triplets thrived under the care of the hired staff, but it was noticeable how they calmed instantly whenever Leah entered the room. It was as if they recognized on some primal level the girl who had protected them in their most vulnerable moments. A week after the rescue, Amanda was discharged from the hospital. Her return to the mansion was marked by a small family celebration, the first of many that Leah would witness with a mixture of fascination and displacement. As someone who had always observed family life from the outside, she was now being invited to come in and sit at the table. It was on that evening, after a simple but warm dinner, that Leah finally gave her answer. The family was gathered in the living room, Amanda in a comfortable armchair, still fragile but visibly stronger, Richard by her side, and the triplets in a special playpen where they could be watched closely. I've thought a lot, Leah began, her voice small but determined, about the adoption, about being part of this family. Richard and Amanda exchanged nervous glances, preparing themselves for any answer. And I want to, the girl continued, a shy smile lighting up her usually serious face. "I want to be the triplets' sister. I want to have a real family." The hug that followed was the first of many. A hug that didn't just envelop bodies, but stories, futures, possibilities. A hug that began to build a bridge over the chasm of experience that separated Leah from her new parents. The months that followed were of mutual adaptation and learning. Leah was enrolled in a school that combined regular teaching with specialized support to help her catch up. Richard made a point of personally following her progress, spending hours at night helping her with her homework. Amanda, for her part, included Leah in all decisions related to the foundation, genuinely valuing her perspectives on the needs of vulnerable children. Together, they developed innovative programs that addressed not only basic needs, but also educational, emotional, and social development. Mrs. Clark became the director of the Foundation's health sector, bringing with her decades of practical experience and a heart dedicated to social justice. Michael, with his knowledge of technology, created systems to map and reach out to street children, offering them pathways out of vulnerability. The triplets grew strong and healthy, developing distinct personalities despite their physical resemblance. And in each of them, Leah could see a small reflection of herself: Sophia's determination, Beatrice's compassion, Laura's resilience. 1 year after that rainy night in Green Park, the Miles family gathered in court for the officialization of the adoption. Leah, now wearing a simple but elegant dress, her hair neatly cut and a healthy glow on skin that was once pale with hunger, was nervous but resolute. When the judge asked if she understood the meaning of the act, if she truly wished to become Leah Miles, her answer was clear and emotional. "I'm already part of this family in my heart. Today, we're just making it official on paper." The sound of the judge's gavel sealing the adoption was like a full stop on a story of abandonment and the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where a street girl would no longer have to fight daily for survival, where she could finally just be a child. That afternoon, the family visited the headquarters of the Amanda Miles Foundation for the Future. The modern building in central London was already operational, with several programs underway serving hundreds of children. In the entrance hall, a bronze plaque caught Leah's attention. Engraved on it was a quote: "Sometimes angels don't have wings, but they have hearts bigger than the entire city. This foundation is dedicated to all the invisible children, to those small heroes who, like Leah Miles, survive and preserve their humanity against all odds." Leah looked at the plaque, then at her new sisters, now sitting in a triple buggy, babbling happily, and finally at her adoptive parents who watched her with unrestrained pride. "Street angels," she murmured, remembering how it all began. "That's how I felt that night, like I'd found little abandoned angels." "But you were the real angel," Amanda replied, hugging her by the shoulders. "You were the angel they needed, and in a way the angel we all needed." The girl smiled, feeling finally at home, not just within a physical building, but within herself, within a purpose, within a family. A family born not of blood, but of choice, the choice to protect, to love, to belong. That night, as she put the triplets to bed, Leah sang the same lullaby she had improvised in the park shed. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." The little ones fell asleep quickly, safe and loved. From the doorway, Richard and Amanda watched the scene with hearts full of gratitude, because in a city where so many were lost to greed, it was a poor girl with nothing but courage and love who saved an entire family. And, in the process, found what she had always been looking for on the cold streets of London, a place to call home.